be with those that are in need and comfort of you today. And thank you for Mark that he's here, and just thank you for the blessings you give us. So forgive us for our sins. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So he's still getting stuff out of his vehicle. So November, our speaker is going to be Justin Visser. I've known Justin a long time. He's from Fremont. He was an Owego County deputy for 20 years. Got out of law enforcement. He's now the youth pastor at Harvest Church in Fremont. A year ago when he went there, they had 120 kids. Now they're closing in on 200. High energy, very energetic. More like he's 20, not 40. And because of his work in the drug team, his just work overall as a deputy, seen a lot of stuff that, you know, probably nobody wants to see. Yeah, it kind of led to an alcohol problem. He's overcome that. Great speaker, high energy. You guys are going to love him. December's open. Drew Collins is going to speak in January. For most of you guys that know, I have a podcast, and we've taken Grant Ministries and White Lake. We've lumped everything together. It's now called Cal's Corner Ministries. If you have any questions about it, I can tell you we're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Yep. What am I missing? Yeah, I got them all? Got them all. You got all 4 platforms? So we got all that. If you have questions about that, see her.
Yeah.
She handles all my...
Social media?
Yeah, social media. Like, I'm like, I'd rather drive an M Farmall. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'd rather drive a tractor. It's easier. This is good thing I have her because I couldn't do all this. So there's that. 3 weeks ago, Ariella and I and Phil Quinlan went to Iowa, to Des Moines. We filmed 7 podcasts there. I filmed 7. My daughter filmed 1. And those will be coming out here in the next few months. We did the 7 podcasts in 36 hours. So we drove out and did the podcast, left on Thursday morning, and we were back by Saturday night by about 1 a.m. So good podcast.
Do you mind if I put a mic on you real quick?
Men.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to bring a kid in the street to the skiing athletes.
In Cal's Corners Ministry?
Cal's Corner, we'll find it. They'll find it all. Everything at Cal's Corner Ministries. Mark Jewell from the MHSAA.
Morning.
And I know you guys have seen the bio, read the bio, so good morning.
Morning.
How you doing?
Great.
Good. How's that traffic?
It was easy this morning.
Okay.
This is on camera at like 7:08 a.m. This is early.
Yeah, but you were a farm kid growing up.
I was, but
Yeah.
we were never on camera in the barn.
Well, that's
so
true.
it was.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. So how about a nice round of applause for Mark?
Thank you. Good morning. Is this good? All right. Greatly appreciate the invitation to be here this morning. As Cal said, you know, my really quick story and background, I actually grew up on a dairy farm in Caledonia. It was, looking back now at 51, probably the greatest lessons of my life. So it was my grandfather and my 2 uncles, dairy and crop farmers. And from about age 10, I found myself over there baling hay to start with. And then when I was in high school, I would, 4 mornings a week, would have the morning milk run. And it was over at the farm by 10 after 4 and out of the barn by 7 and getting to school by 7:30. And, you know, it taught me a couple things. The first, that I could not work the rest of my life as hard as what my grandfather and what my 2 uncles did. It was an unbelievable encouragement to go to school, to get a degree, because as much as I loved them and the work and the time we got to spend together, I just couldn't, I wasn't wired that way. The other lesson, which I feel a little bit bad because I feel like I've shortchanged my own kids, is the greatest lesson I got from it was you have to show up. There were lots of mornings where I didn't want to get up and be where I had to be. But you learned awfully quick in that line of work is you can't roll over in bed, pick up the phone, call into the barn and tell the cows, hey, I just don't feel like doing this today. That you commit to something, you get up, you do it, whether you're feeling great, whether you're feeling miserable, whether you're sick, whatever the reason or excuse is. Even as a 14-year-old kid, you learn pretty quickly it just doesn't matter. So Ironically, I went to I grew up in Caledonia, went to their football game last night, and because of all the construction, 96 ended up taking the back roads. It went by, over under on me doing this, by the way, is like 4. I have reached that age where I can't talk about certain things, but at least my starting to cry a little bit. But it was just kind of, it was weird. So wonderful to be here. I'm going to really 2 topics I want to share. First, just really, really quickly, my own story, and then kind of melt that into sports and what we do in the day job. And I think there's some real life takeaways because I'm not sure there's anything in our society that really teaches, especially young people and often old people like me, more lessons about life than what sports does. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I get to do sports for a living every single day. If you're around sports long enough, it will break your heart. It will absolutely break your heart. But I think there's a lot of parallels, though, with life, too. All of us in this room, at different stages or times in our lives, life is nothing but a series of peaks and valleys. And there's a saying that, for every guy who thinks he's sitting on top of the world, wait 24 hours and you'll have spent time at the bottom. And I think for all of us, wherever we are in terms of our personal lives, in terms of where we are with our relationship with Jesus and in the Lord, and health and family challenges and all those things, I really believe that from the day we start till the day that our earthly journey ends, it's a never-ending cycle of this. And I think part of real wisdom is figuring out, when you're at the top of the wave, is there something I'm doing where I'm at the top of the wave? And by the way, when we're all at the top of the wave, that's not the time where a lot of us lean on our faith or the Bible, is it? When things are good, very rarely do you find that person who, things are just going great, and why are things going great right now? And they'll point to Scripture, they'll point to their faith. We just don't hear about that. When's the time when we all hear about that? Well, it's when you're on one of those down times. It's, again, 51. I'll talk briefly about my family here in just a second, but a colleague of mine, very wise man, said, you know what I've now found having adult kids is that you're only as happy as your least happy child at the moment. I said, that's really good. So my really quick story, as I said, grew up in Caledonia. My parents are salt of the earth people, but weren't necessarily church people. When you grow up and you're kind of on the farm, time is of the essence. And there just wasn't time on Sundays to where we spent a lot of time going to church or to youth group or those things. So I really grew up having a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong. If you get to know me a little bit, you'll find that I am the most vanilla, boring guy on the planet. I am a straight arrow, no hobbies. I don't hunt. I don't fish. I'm a terrible golfer. My 3 gigs in life are my faith, it's my family, and my work. And those are the 3 things that I've been able just to kind of pour myself into. But that was kind of growing up. Went to Calvin College and figured I'd be around, again, even though I wasn't a strong church kid, but I had a strong faith. Believed in Jesus and had asked to be saved and was really confident about what the future was going to hold. And you go to this school, and again, wonderful school. I had a great experience at Calvin. Great experience. But you go to a school to where you think others are wired that same way, and what I learned very, very quickly was that those that tended to talk and preach the most about their faith, you would often see making decisions that were contrary to that. Now, I'm sure part of that was a lot of 18 and 19-year-old kids who had grown up in very conservative backgrounds, and for the first time of their life, they had some freedom and some ability to make their own choices. And I just saw a lot of my friends at Calvin that the message they gave you on Sunday morning was a lot different than what I saw last Saturday night. And I struggled with that because, again, just being simple farm folk, the hypocrisy of it. I struggled with that. And again, that was probably me being 18 and naive, but what that did is in my early 20s coming out of college, Mark, could you ever go to a group and talk about faith and life and those things? And I would have said never, ever, ever. Because you see some of that, it seemed like the folks that were espousing the most were the ones who their actions were completely misaligned. And so you then get into early life and, got married and start having kids and work and, being somebody who could talk openly about faith and those things, that was an area that was of just very little comfort. So out of school, was a teacher and a coach for 4 years. There are many moments I wish I could go back and have stayed in the classroom. Life was so simple. I was coaching varsity football at Thornapple Kellogg in Middleville. My wife was our varsity girls basketball coach. It was before kids of our own, and between the two of us, we had about 100 of our own kids. It was the 70 kids in my football program. It was the 30 kids in her basketball program. That's back when girls basketball in Michigan was played in the fall, and it was 70-hour work weeks with our 100 kids, and we were life was just so simple then. And opportunity came along to become a high school AD, which I took because, of course, at the time it was a little more money, right? How many of us have made decisions at some point in our life where it was because a little bit more money? Now you're making that big administrator money, no longer the classroom teacher money. And was an AD for 3 years, liked it. What you found very, very quickly, though, is when you moved from being the classroom and everybody loved you to now becoming the athletic director where you've got to make tough decisions, which a lot of times not just affect the kids, but more importantly can dent mom and dad's ego a little bit. I found that in Middleville, that circle of friends that I had as a classroom teacher shrunk when you were now in a leadership and a decision-making role. Another really, really good life lesson. Could have seen ourselves staying there forever, and when I was 29, an opportunity with the High School Athletic Association came about. They were looking for somebody who had been an AD, which I had for all of 3 years, but yet my one hobby in life is officiating. Umpired college baseball for a long, long time. Met some of my very best friends on the planet. Literally has taken me all over the world. A really quick story. So I was the lone American umpire at the 2007 Pan Am Games, Rio de Janeiro. So Mark got to spend 2 weeks in Rio. It was great. 20 umpires, and I was the only one that spoke a syllable of English. We had 7 of the other umpires were from Central America and Mexico, and then the rest of our crew were all the Brazilian umpires. Well, in Brazil, what's the number one sport? Clearly, it's soccer. These folks had ever barely seen a baseball, so the Brazilian guys only got to work second and third base. So I think of the 15 games I umpired, I think 11 were behind the plate. Well, it's the first game of the tournament, and camera like this, and they put a microphone on, and I had the plate, and it was Cuba and Mexico. Well, this was historic. It was the first nationally televised baseball game ever in Brazil. So out we come to home plate. Thank God we had our interpreter, Pedro. So Pedro's right next to me, and out comes the Cuban manager or head coach, and you can just tell by his body language he is not thrilled that an American is working the plate. Lots and lots of politics in international sports, I learned. Well, out comes the manager from Mexico, and of course they get the list of umpires before the game, and he comes out and he steps right toward me and he puts his hand out and he says, "Mark, Vinny Castilla, it's great to meet you." Well, Vinny Castilla was a 20-year big leaguer with the Colorado Rockies. Well, from Mexico, and for the Pan Am Games, Castilla, who was probably in his early 40s at the time, could still play, was the player manager for Team Mexico. Well, great. So we're exchanging the lineup cards. Everything's going just great. Well, of course, in the locker room before the game, I really can't have much of a pregame meeting with my crew because I'm the only one who speaks English. So we've got my second base umpire's from Colombia, guessing probably mid to late 60s, and we're exchanging the lineups, and he says something to Castilla in Spanish. And Vinny says something back, and they're volleying back and forth in Spanish. Next thing I know is Castilla's given one of the extra copies of his lineup cards to my second base umpire. And I'm thinking, well, that must be like the Spanish version of the lineups. Okay, whatever. Back and forth, and then the next thing I know is Castilla, in the top of his uniform, had a Sharpie marker kind of in his jersey. Well, now I see Castilla reaching for his Sharpie marker, and I kind of leaned to my interpreter. I said, Pedro, ¿qué pasa? What's going on? And he, as dryly as he can, leans in and he says, your second base umpire is asking Vinny Castilla for his autograph. And this is at the pregame meeting, and of course the Cuban manager's taking in every word of this. So it's like, well, we were going to have a challenging day. What's interesting is in about the fifth inning, Cuba brings in this baby-faced kid who is throwing stuff I had never seen before. I was umpiring in the Big Ten at the time, and you get down there, it's like, holy cow, who is this guy? Well, it was a 15-year-old Yolandis Chapman who is still pitching in the big leagues today. Last really quick story about Rio. So my roommate was Daniel from the Dominican Republic. Great guy, I think, because again, we weren't able to really speak much. It was a lot of sign language and, nods and hand gestures. Well, the last 4 days, they had kind of saved a ton of money to where Daniel's father joined us. And so we had a hotel room with 2 beds and a pull-out couch. So I took the pull-out couch, gave Daniel's dad the bed. Well, they had grown up in a very small town in the Dominican where there were no buildings bigger than 1 story. So we were in like a 15-story hotel in Rio, right there on Copacabana Beach. And I learned that his dad loved to sit in the lobby of the hotel. Why? Well, as Pedro later told me, it was because of the magic box. Does anybody know what the magic box was in the hotel lobby? It was the elevator. And so Daniel's father would sit in the elevator, and he was just amazed as the doors would open and a person would come out. And then a minute or two later, the doors open again and a person would go in and they would disappear. And again, Pedro is telling us the story a little bit later on. He had kind of taken a shine to Daniel's dad and back and forth. And he basically says, yeah, he says, Daniel's dad was down in the lobby last evening and a very large, round lady gets onto the elevator and the doors close and poof, away she goes. And then about 45 seconds later, the doors open again and out comes another female, but considerably more attractive and more younger. And as the story goes, apparently Daniel's father tells Daniel, go find your mother. So apparently some jokes work even across language barriers that way. But officiating was the hobby. So I've now been with the MHSAA. This is my 21st year. I was an assistant director the first 14, was kind of in charge of officials and complaints, to be honest with you. Not many Monday mornings went by during especially the fall and winter where I would not get a phone call on Monday morning about some kind of complaint, often about the referees at the 7th grade basketball game on Friday, because apparently Tom Izzo was out in the hallway giving away scholarships at the 7th grade game. Well, the last 8 years, when Jack Roberts retired, one of my true mentors in life, he retired, and I'm in my 8th year as the director. Everything was going great until March of 2020 hit. And I will really say that is one of the big pivot points of my life, is when COVID hit. So you're in charge of this athletic enterprise, which depends on folks being able to interact and compete with one another. And when the whole world stopped, we didn't know what to do. We tried to advocate as strongly as we could that we felt like kids needed activity and needed to be around other people, not just from an athletic sense, but it was really more of a mental health sense. During COVID, so we were getting lots and lots of pressure from everybody. During May of COVID into June, I was getting, this is no exaggeration, I was getting roughly 4,000 emails a day. And so, of course, I couldn't work from home. I had to go in. I'm 10 minutes from the office, would go into the office and would sit down and fire up my computer and 4,000 emails in the inbox every morning, and I would go through every one. Because again, we weren't doing anything else at that time, so all I had to do was look at email. And you would open one, and I will save you the language, but you would open one, and it would essentially start, Mr. Ewell, for every person that is passed due to COVID, the blood is on your hands. For people like you to suggest that it's somehow safe for our kids to play when, basically, just being unsympathetic to the plight of the virus and those things, you have blood on your hands. In more words or less. Okay, close that one up. Open up the next one, and Mr. Ewell, you are the most spineless human being I've ever encountered, because you should just stand up and tell the governor to take her restrictions and basically shove it. So you would go through all of these emails, and you were getting beat up from both extremes. You really couldn't do anything right. Now the good news is at least the 4,000 every day ran about 50-50. So if nothing else, I was pissing people off equally. It was a lot like sports officiating, right? I guess if you've got everybody upset at you somewhat equally, if nothing else, you're probably being fairly consistent. Well, kind of the serious part of this is our oldest was ready to go off to college. So I've got 3 kids. So I've got now a 24-year-old, a 22-year-old, and an 18-year-old. So COVID hits, all sorts of uncertainty for all of us every day, right? We all thought, well, this will last another week, or maybe it'll be a 2-week thing. And so you've just got all of this personal, just lack of any kind of stability. Well, then you add on that our oldest is kind of at the end of his freshman year of college. So you're dealing with all of, your first kid has kind of left the nest. You go into the office every day, and you just feel now the pressure that you've got to try and do something to where kids can begin to play again. What was interesting is folks really weren't losing their mind about school and academics being online or virtual or different. Where was everybody really pointing their venom? Well, it was sports, right? All those kids who were seniors in 2020 lost their spring season, and then there was all kinds of questions of what the 2021 school year would look like. Well, my middle kid was going to be a senior in 2021. So this whole thing of, well, you don't get it, from the parent perspective. Well, no, I absolutely get it from the parent perspective that, our middle kid is going to kind of go around the diamond for the last time. And then, we had one in middle school yet at the time. And it was, so work stunk. And what I found is that with the pressures of just COVID, the pressures of a kid moving out, the pressures of what are we going to do, really for the first time in my life, it put completely different stresses and pressures on our marriage. Been married now almost 30 years, so it was a time where everything was aligning in like a really bad way. The MHSAA, we're a private, not-for-profit corporation, so we don't receive any taxpayer dollars. The way that our organization is able to function and the way that it works is every summer, every school district in our state joins our organization. It's voluntary. So I'll just pick on, because we're here, so when Whitehall joins the MHSAA each summer, they say we are joining as a member for the 25-26 school year. And the way that the social contract works is we're going to join the organization, and we agree to follow all the rules. And as long as Whitehall follows all of the rules, they get to be in our postseason tournaments. Well, when schools join us, it's free. As I say all the time, we're a really cheap date. So we have a $15 million a year operating budget. Well, of our $15 million, 76%, so every $3 out of $4 that we make, is from selling tickets at districts, regionals, quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. We don't see any revenue for the regular season, but that's how we have 25 employees. We're a pretty lean, mean machine. But you walk through our building, and every 4 employees that you see, we're able to hire and pay 3 of the 4 because we can sell tickets. Does anybody remember how many tickets we could sell when we did get back to play as we're coming out of COVID, it was 2 tickets per participant. Well, when 76% of your revenue is based on selling tickets, and you can only do that now 2 tickets at a time for every kid that plays, that's how Mark got really gray, very fat, very old, very fast. So you even talk about work pressure, and now you're starting to feel in COVID the financial pressures of not just the organizations, but of those other 24 employees. You know what? They've all got kids in school or in college, or a colleague is caring for a sick parent who maybe doesn't have the world's greatest. And so all the bad things that could kind of align did for me in about an 18-month period. And then all the ups and downs as the world kind of got started again, and then we had that pause in November, and we then had to finish that fall season in January, and of course I got all kinds of criticism because the only reason we were doing it is because of Mark Ewell's kid and his football team. Well, it was because of every kid on every team. That became pretty easy. So where I kind of fast forward with all of this is it is in those, again, you talk about the peaks and the valleys. Well, that 18 months was about as low of a valley as you could find. It was incredibly lonely. It was incredibly isolating because work was miserable. I mean, there were days I'd come home and the kids would say, "Dad, I'd stay off your phone tonight. The internet hates you today." And again, you kind of laugh and chuckle, but that kind of stuff does bother you. And then, it puts stress on your relationship, and you're going through a new stage of life with kids. And what it really did was, for the first time in my life, it made me really look inward at my own faith, that in real times of struggle, what's Mark really all about? Is Mark having a strong faith and trying to do the right thing? Is that what he's really all about? And what it really did was, it was during that bottom that I really felt like God spoke to me, and he said, you need to look for more opportunities to talk about faith, especially with other men. We are terrible for asking for help. I think that's how we're wired, yes? When we are struggling or we need help, I think society, and given kind of the relative age that a lot of us are, that I think has been seen as a weakness, right? If you need help or you can't quite, well, that's somehow a weakness or a failure on your part. And what I learned is I had to find some people that could kind of help me get from the bottom of that wave back up to the top. And certainly circumstances were part of it, but finding, and I was able to find 2 incredibly trusted mentors who were both men of faith, and as they kind of helped get me through that bottom of the wave, I'll forever be in their debt. One we lost, he was a coworker of mine. It was Tom Rashid, who was our associate director. Tom was a lifelong bachelor. He described himself, I'm just quoting Tom, that Tom was Catholic as hell. He was a Lebanese Catholic who loved his cocktails, loved his cigarettes, could be the most colorfully languaged speaker I have ever heard in my life. But Tom was also that guy that every single morning, 7 days a week, was at 6:30 a.m. Mass. He would say he was the most imperfect guy on the planet, but Tom was also the most authentic person I've ever met. You want to talk about just a real person, faults and all, every single day. And in many respects, he helped me grow in my faith, and in some cases, I think, kind of saved me in a really, really tough time. Well, 6 months later, Tom isn't feeling very well. Again, lifelong bachelor, so another guy, he wouldn't reach out for help himself. Didn't believe in doctors, right? Because when guys our age go to doctors, we usually get bad news, and just wasn't feeling right. We're coming out of COVID. Everybody's feeling better about things, and he goes in, and they diagnose him with lung cancer. And within 3 months, he's gone. So, again, you talk about just as you think you're getting toward the top of the wave, that's part of life. And that's really part of sports. So with the sports part of this, as I said earlier, I mean, there are more the reason I believe so strongly in having sports in our schools is I think, unlike anything else, this is where kids really learn about life. Kids don't build adversity by flunking a math class. But where you do learn some adversity is being a part of a team. And in most team experiences, you'll win and you'll lose. You'll have highs and you'll have lows. Great moments and tough moments. But you know what? Every loss or setback, hopefully in the sports realm, only serves as motivation for that next opportunity to be more successful. And I think when you really get to it, that's what all of us deal with every single day with life. It's ups and it's downs, it's good moments and bad. And I'm a firm believer that athletics teaches those skills better than anything else. My 3 kids have all lived the heartbreak of sports. Now, they're 3 experiences I wouldn't trade for anything. This is where I'll probably cry 2 or 3 times. What did we set the over-under at? Was it 3.5? So my oldest, 24, incredibly average athlete growing up. Loved Jackson dearly, but Jackson was the world's most average football, basketball, and baseball kid. I married a Youper, so our kids even played some hockey. They could all skate before they could walk. But Jack, incredibly average, high school freshman, and I worried all the time, is Jackson going to find his path, his people? And is a 6'2", 160, different body type than his dad, obviously, 165-pound freshman. He's playing freshman football, playing guard. Great. Well, week 7, he pulls, and at the end of the play, gets rolled up, and he doesn't get up. Well, the rule is in our house that when you're playing and you get knocked down, is unless it is a life or death situation, you get your rear end up, and if you're hurt, you walk off the field. That is the rule, and that's, my wife is the one, that is her rule, and he lays there on the field. We're at Greenville. Thinking this isn't good. Well, he breaks his tib fib. So, surgery, pin screws, the whole thing. So my wife, to her everlasting credit, so she walks Jackson down to our pool after the surgery, and it's about a month later, and now Jackson can finally start to do some rehab. Well, it's November. She walks him down to our pool to find out when the open swim hours are, just to get him rehabbing. Walks in and she runs right into our boys swim coach, who, by the way, boys swim is a winter sport in Michigan, and practice just started that week. And Brock Delaney, our coach, people that you'll thank forever. It's 2. Runs literally right into Brock, says, hey, when are the open swim hours? And he says, well, I've only got like 4 freshmen on our team. Why don't just have Jackson join our team? We'll get him rehab and it'll be great. Wonderful. Well, we go by like a month and Jackson comes home, still on crutches. And he says, hey, we have a swim meet tomorrow night. I'm like, what? I thought you were just kind of rehabbing and stuff. No, I'm going to swim in the meet. And sure enough, show up to the meet, and he crutches over to the starting blocks, gets up on the blocks. There's not a gun in swim, but the beep, and he literally fell off the blocks into the water and just swam all upper body. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cute. And well, he ends up growing and really likes it, and as a sophomore has an even better year swimming, and a long story short, ends up at Hope College and is an All-American swimmer at Hope. And as Brock Delaney still says, it is the greatest broken leg in the history of the DeWitt High School swim program. So my point with Jackson is a lot of time with our kids or our grandkids, there's a pressure right now that everybody's got to pick their sport when they're 6, right? Got to have your little webcast press conference, and you've got to pick up the ball or the hat of what you're going to pick as a 6-year-old. And I just think there's way too much specialization and way too much folks putting all their eggs in one basket. So that's a really, really cool story. So another reason I'm a little more emotional today is our middle kid was that kid who was a senior that COVID year. He's our different kid. God sprinkled something a little different on him. He wanted to play Division I football, was only 5'11". Again, Dad's a realist. I know what Division I linebackers look like, and many of them aren't 5'11". Well, the 2 schools that he got in during COVID was he got a chance to play at both the United States Air Force Academy and at the Naval Academy. Does anybody know what happens at noon today? Those two play. So this will be the first Air Force service game that my wife and I haven't been at in the last 4 years. So Grant was able to go to the Air Force Academy, was able to get a spot and basically an invite to walk on. And so as a freshman, freshmen don't play at the academy. They brought in 88 football players in Grant's freshman class. So Grant and I are very close. And he said, Dad, I looked around that meeting room that first day with 87 other freshmen, and there was a part of me that said to myself, I am never going to be able to play here. So none of the freshmen dress. As a sophomore, he actually earned a jersey, but didn't travel, didn't see the field at all. And then as a junior, somehow slowly worked his way up the pecking order, was a special teamer as a junior. And again, you want to talk about your kid going away to school, being up every morning at 6 a.m., being screamed at every morning by 6:06 a.m., outside of his door, standing at attention for morning formation in brief, the academic rigor there, and then you're still trying to figure out the whole football thing, and your kid is halfway across the country. Again, you're only as happy as your kid who's struggling the most. And just continue to work, and it's like, is this 5'11" kid from small town Michigan get a chance? And now and by the way, he had two studs that played in front of him his sophomore and junior years. Well, those two kids graduate. And as a senior, he's like, it's July, and he's like, Dad, I think I got a shot at starting. Okay, Grant, whatever, we'll see. And sure enough, first game the following month, and first game of the year, he has 11 tackles. Forced a fumble, recovered a fumble, we win. It's like, yeah, I guess you can play. This is pretty good, Grant. Week 2, San Jose State, 14 he was, again, this isn't Dad, former coach talking, he was our best player on defense the first 3 games of the year. Was elected a team captain. Just talk about getting to the top of the wave. His 3 years of just waiting and sitting, and is this ever going to happen? Top of the wave. And then week 4, we go to Baylor. Sold out, 60,000 people, coolest atmosphere you ever played in. Forces a fumble in the first quarter, just killing it. And 3 minutes left before halftime. There's a tackle, and he gets up, and it's 4th and 1, and Baylor's going fast, and Grant somehow makes the play into the backfield and stops the guy, and we stop him on 4th down. The game was tied at the time. He gets up, and he kind of runs off the field excited, but with a real hitch. And dads notice that kind of stuff right away. Well, on 3rd down, his partner linebacker had gone for the tackle and missed, and coming in like a missile, he hit Grant in the side of the knee. So Grant kind of limps off, but we're thinking, okay, it's just a little ankle, we'll tape it up, and Grant's a pretty tough kid. Into the tent, so we're there, we're in the upper deck at Baylor, and out of the tent, thinking good, and they take him right up the runway into the locker room, just before halftime. Okay, we're a little more concerned, but come on, it's Grant, he's tough. And not 5 minutes later, we get a text, and it said ACL. So my wife and I sit there the entire second half, sobbing, because you think it's over. All the work, all the struggle, the bottom of the wave. So Grant was dealing with it a lot better than Mom and Dad were. So we see him after the game, and so we change our flight, and we head back to Colorado Springs the next morning, and an MRI, and we get that done, and oh, yep, completely torn ACL. And basically, it's over. We fly home. Hard time getting out of bed for a week. Just, again, you talk about how you can attach yourself to your kids and their experiences, and you're only doing as well as your kid who's struggling the most. Well, it's a week later, and he calls. Hey, how you doing, G? Expecting, one of these conversations again. He said, hey, I talked to the medical staff today. Okay. He says, I want to see if I can brace it and play. Huh? They think with my position, because I'm not a skill fast guy, I'm just a grunt, that we think they can put me in an ACL brace. And because being a linebacker, it's a lot of straight lines. If I was a defensive back, couldn't work, or a receiver. And so they rehab him for 3 weeks, and the son of a gun dresses and played the last 5 games of the year, all on a torn ACL. Now, he did say, Dad, the drugs they gave me pregame were really good. And finished, and it was I think God working, because in those last 5 games, which by the way we won 4 of the last 5. So the quick dad stat: last year, the games that Grant started and played, we went 5-3. The 4 games in October he was out rehabbing, we went 0-4. So again, that's just my dad's stat. I don't think there's any real correlation to that, but and in each of the last 4 wins, he had a sack or a play on 4th down in every one of those games where it was like there was a reason for all of this. So again, you're just talking a matter of weeks. The high of the high, the low of the low. And then lastly, and I know we're getting closer to finishing, I do want to open up, see if you have any just general MHSAA questions. And so I'm kind of struggling today, by the way. This is the first Air Force Navy game we haven't been at. And so those are just different, even with the government shutdown, by the way. They're still going to play today. And then our youngest, and by the way, our kids went their whole athletic careers without any knee injuries. Well, our daughter, pretty good basketball player, she's now playing at Grand Valley. She tore each of her ACLs within 11 months. So we went our whole lives with no injuries, and we had 3 ACLs within like a year and a half. Really gritty kid, tough kid, and she's kind of used that for her fuel as well. So just in our own kids' experiences, now looking back at the end, I wouldn't change anything about any of the 3, and they'd say the same thing. But do know that in that period, there were a million ups and downs. And during those downs, those could have been reasons to quit, to go do something else, to hang it up, to do whatever. And the reason why I think that having sports as part of our schools, and my own 3 kids' experiences, and I'm sure for every one of your kids' experiences, both ends of the wave are going to serve them well the rest of their lives. That's what it's all about. It's not playing at the next level. It's not having it's none of the personal accolades. It's the lessons of when life knocks you down. You've got a couple of choices. You can either wallow and be a victim, or be a martyr, or just be in pity the rest of your life, or you can suck it up, you can dust yourself off, and you can figure out how to make it a little bit better. If you're ever looking for some scripture, I just want to point you to a couple, and I apologize for peeking at my phone, but Philippians 4:13, I'm sure many of us know, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And again, we probably don't lean on that as much when times are great, but when we are at the bottom of one of those waves, that can be really, really insightful. Others, Romans 8:28 and Jeremiah 29:11, offer comfort that challenges can be part of God's larger purpose and plans. So when Grant got hurt at Baylor, again, while we were in the wallowing self-pity period, it was why, right? The kid did everything right. The kid has worked his tail off. The kid has done everything to get this chance, and now after 3 games, it appears that, God, you're taking it away. And now looking back, what God really was doing was creating yet another opportunity for Grant, but in a way that none of us could have imagined at the time. I really try and work life, and every problem, instead of painting it as a negative problem, how about we take those negatives and see what kind of positive opportunity can that bring about? How can I take this problem or issue and kind of flip it where it really can be a means of growth and an opportunity? James 1, verses 2-4 encourages us to find joy in the trials, seeing them as opportunities for faith to grow. And then lastly, 2 Corinthians verse 4, 8, and 9 reminds us that though afflicted, we are never destroyed. It truly is when we quit, that's when we're done. I don't care what socioeconomic group you're in, what kind of stage of life you're currently in terms of relationships and work and finances. And, God tends to put hurdles on the track for all of us at different times and varying heights. And I really think, though, that faith and belief in Him can really help us in those bottom turns of the wave to somehow bring us back up top. So that's my story. I would thank you for that. The MHSAA guy will take a smattering of applause whenever he can get it, believe me. But that's really, that to me in a nutshell is what sports is. It's not the final score. It's not a record. It's not winning a state title. It's all of those lessons that were woven into that season or woven into that 4-year experience that I think kids can really look back on, and then adults, and draw from those the rest of their lives. And I think kids that haven't been involved in sports just can't do that. So that's why I'm such a proponent. That's why I'm such a believer. And that's why the MHSAA, we just celebrated our 100th. I'm still not sure if it was a birthday or an anniversary last year, but school sports in Michigan started in 1924, and we celebrated year 100 last year. We're starting our second century this year, and while technology and society has changed an awful lot over the last 101 years, I do think at the end of the day, the things that kids get out of being part of a team and part of competitive athletics, I think those lessons ring as true today as they ever have. So, does anybody have any questions about school sports in our state, the MH?